Hello and welcome to Hanger v Hobby Hangout, the plastic podcast that is very unprofessional and very opinionated. I am one of your hosts, Springer,
And I'm his co-host Tux. Hello, also known as Loretype.
and today we're gonna be talking about in-person meetups. And so today we have with us our panel of guests. We have Jag,
The points don't mean anything.
Magic,
What's up?
and Optimistic.
Hello.
So today I kind of want to talk about something we've touched on vaguely in some other episodes where we talk about in-person meetups, and I just kind of want to talk about people's experiences, in like the importance of it, things that they got away, takeaways, and just like general feeling of it. Because I mean, a lot of our hobby has kind of shifted towards us interacting online, right? I mean, I think that's where all of us have met. We've all met online. I don't think, uh, and so like we're kind of like trying to like get back to an analog of IRL. Let's go touch grass, but with plastic. Um, so like kind of kicking this off for myself, I've only really been to like a local IPMS meetup. So like the local chapter, which means that I'm more in a generalist sort of setting where the majority of the people I'm interacting with are, you know, doing a different vertical slice of the hobby where they're like, oh, we touch armor modeling and planes and you have sci-fi and we don't really understand that. And like that's okay. But I've really gained a lot of let's say like experience in terms of like getting the takeaways from what they put into their work and like been able to get like almost a complete outsider's perspective. My local club does a show and tell, which I really like. Uh, Actually, I was really excited to like have a time to be purely dedicated to be like, hey, this is what I brought, and I would like some feedback. And it's in a setting where people are not going to sit there and be mean about it. They might not understand it, and they're more than happy to ask you questions. And then like I've gotten some really good feedback about weathering and like just a lot of different things, and then also like that's given me a chance to like expose other people who might not otherwise have picked up gunpla or what they consider sci-fi adjacent models.
Oh, well, I guess I'll counter it with that. I think it's neat that you have the outsider's perspective because it's just familiar enough for you to be familiar with like the plastic, but like it's so much different than putting together a Gundam model kit because like. And I've said this before, and I will say it again. Bandai alone has done so much for these specific like technologies regarding and involving plastic injection molding for models. It is freaking bonkers. Like it's so much easier and so much more accessible to like put together a model now than it was, say 20 years ago. And I
Yeah,
think that's pretty cool.
yeah,
It's
and that,
interesting. I'm not sure. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm not sure how much has changed since 20 years ago, but
Yeah, maybe
definitely.
that was a little it's a
No,
little
no,
fast.
well, no. Actually, to be honest, like if you want to go back, if we want to go back 20 years, 20 years, we had all the big Bandai things. They still had their patent on the multi injection thing they do.
Oh yeah, you're
Um,
right.
and they'd already been doing like the multi-injection frames and stuff since the early 90s for the Victory kits and like the
Late
and
eight- late late
those
eighties with the
mod-
Musha.
well, I was gonna say I can remember if those were late 80s or early 90s as well. They were the next
Uh,
thing I was going to mention.
89 was when they did the three Musha kits with the first of the action frames, and then 90 was when they rolled out the original high grade line with the action frame.
Yep. Yeah, so they've been doing those. They've been doing those for like 35-ish years now. But then what I was going to say is the thing that has noticeably changed really since the 90s, is that they've improved the gating a lot. Undergate, like the use of undergating on like plated parts is like one of the two things, and the other one is the entry grade, like the way the entry grade and like the Pucci guys and a couple of other things like go together. I think Hello Kitty,
The
Hello
touch
Kitty,
gates?
kit as well. Yeah, the touch gates where you don't need tools to get them off the sprue.
Mhm.
Those
Their
are
animal
really
series are also touch gates.
Yeah, I think some of the Pokemon ones as well. But yeah, so they, like those are a really big deal in terms of making Gunpla really accessible, to me at least.
Mhm.
And those are within the last 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, I'll say like just a lot of like the one thing I would say I've picked up on in person sort of things is getting to expose people who might not have ever looked at a Bandai designed kit. They're like, I brought a perfect grade to a meetup, and they're like, oh, it's unpainted. I go, yep, it's all molded in exactly that color, and they're like, wow, that's fantastic. Because like one of the guys was there, he brought his kids, and his kids were trying to get into modeling, and I was like, here's your avenue. Like you can do stuff that looks cool, and it's you don't have to paint it if you want to.
Right out of the box. Like they look really good.
Yeah.
And no glue as well. That's what got me into Gunpla was the no glue requirement for most kits.
I mean, other brands have no glue kits, but their tooling is. Well,
Not
Like
Bandai
glue-
tooling.
it's because I know when these Bandai launched their the line of Star Wars kits, a lot of older traditional model makers were upset because their only experience with SnapFit was basically awful kits from AMT and Airfix, and I think Revel, and they didn't realize like, oh, you could actually have something with really good engineering that is push fit.
So like moving on from like differences between Bandai kits and other kits, because I think that could be a whole episode in and of itself, honestly. And I nearly fell into that trap by talking about the difference between them and Games Workshop stuff. I think that like in person meetups are something you can letting me adjust my chair there for a second in case it makes a horrible squeak. Yeah, like in person meetups can be kind of all sorts of different things. And I was trying to think, like thinking back before this episode, I was trying to think back about like what the first in-person thing I went to kind of specifically for the sake of Gunpla was. And I think kind of the interesting thing is the first time like I went and met up with somebody explicitly for like Gunpla related purposes was when a friend of mine and I went to go see a guy from the Fichtenfu forums back in like the 2000s, early mid 2000s. Because the guy, yeah, so the guy, like it was a guy who lived a couple of hours away from us, but like also in the UK, and he was selling. Basically, he was having a big hobby clear out. And we were like, well, we live close enough that we could drive on down and like see stuff in person, like just give you cash and take things home. He had so much lovely stuff. Like Jag, you would have gone mad for it. Like he had loads of really old, like lovely licensed resin vinyl stuff. I think he had that. I think he had the Volks, was it the Volks vinyls or Koto vinyls? Like the licensed Charles Counterattack ones. But he had all sorts of like really lovely stuff like that. But it was like it was cool to go and see this. So it was really fun to go and see this other slightly older nerd's like man cave in the like the loft of his house, because he had a very nice job. He had a lot of money. And like his he had a nice big house with like his wife and kids, and like they converted like their like attic into sort of a spare bedroom and also his hobby space. So he just had like a massive, really nicely maintained hobby space full of all these really lovely things. And like while it was cool to like buy the stuff, but we ended up just chatting well into like the small hours of the morning, just like shooting the breeze about hobby stuff, because I think it was the first time he'd like. I think we said we sort of talked about it, and he said it had been ages since anybody who appreciated the Gunpla side of his hobby stuff had been round, because he also did cosplay things. I think he was involved with the 501st, like the the Star Wars cosplay people.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was completely outside of my interest, so we just stuck to Gunpla. But he was, he was just really ecstatic to be able to talk about that side of things, and also have people who appreciated like the weird and oddities from his collection, and stuff like that. And like he got to show off like his favorite build, and we talked about techniques and gear, and we were like, because my friend and I were like in our like our early 20s at the time, and so it was just like, wow, this would be really great to have when we're grown-ups. And that was, I thought that would be probably quite different to anyone else's like hobby meetup experience, and I thought it'd be a fun little story to share, because like it's, it doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be a convention, it doesn't have to be even like a local IPMS chapter meetup or something. It could just be like you meet one person online who's close enough, and you geek out together about your hobby. And I thought that was cool.
Yeah, actually that's kind of more in line with one of my first meetups as well, which was there was the pop-up shop going on in San Diego. So a handful of us from one Discord were like, hey, let's all just like go hang out in San Diego for like a few days, and like also check out the pop-up shop while it's still there. And like, so a whole bunch of us who have like never met in person got to finally go hang out for a few days. We like rented an Airbnb. Some people brought model kits. I was one of those people. And it was yeah, it was really cool. I mean, like, we didn't really do a lot of building, but there was like a lot of just the same hanging out, but like in person. It was kind of neat, just finally, like, we bridged, you know the distance, or was it the just like the hobby brought us together, just being able to like hang out in person. It was kind of neat.
And that actually kind of like segues really nice to my personal like in-person meetup like experiences. Full disclosure, like I live in a very densely populated area. B, I have about 3 hobby towns around me that sell really good gunpla. Like it is very easy to get locally, and those aren't even like the only places you can get gunpla. C, one of those hobby towns is the like Bandai official distributor of the entire state, and I live in a very large state. So like I just have a very really good like local community for Gunpla specifically, and I realize this is not everyone's experience. D, I am also extremely neurotypical and good with people. I am not a people person, I am good with people. There is a difference. All of these like aspects definitely come together in a perfect storm of really fantastic experiences, and in like that and in finding that, because I've been going to local meetups, I think solidly for almost 5 years now. Started right before the pandemic. We shifted to like online meetups for a little bit, and then as things calmed down, eventually, we went back to in-person meetups. But like something that I have noticed is that it like brings a lot of people together. There's a very solid community of guys who otherwise would have never met each other and would have no reason to know each other, and now they're like really good friends. Like I don't know of anyone like necessarily being in anyone's like wedding party or anything from Gunpla, but like I've met people and have been involved in weddings because of Gunpla and other stuff like that. And I think 2 of my local friends like met because of plastic models and stuff, and like one was literally the other one's best man, and they like repeatedly, both of them got married at separate times, not even to each other, and they did that, and it was just really sweet. So like I think in-person meetups are like a really really good thing specifically for, and you'll have to forgive me if I'm generalizing a little bit, but cisgendered straight heterosexual men specifically, because we as men, mostly of us mostly men, are not necessarily socialized to find new and other social circles outside of, say, our romantic partners. And I think like pursuing hobbyist spaces in person specifically is extremely healthy and something we should absolutely celebrate and like encourage more often, because that basically gives you another set of friends that you would have otherwise never even known.
Yeah. I think a lot of that actually aligns with some of the experiences I've run into because it was like I kind of waffled for probably a better part of a year or so before finding out that there was a local club. And I was like, oh, I should go. Yeah, maybe next month.
Oh
And
my
then
god.
like, yeah, and then like I finally like just said, I'm gonna I'm gonna go, and I showed up. And like one of the things that I was told, they're like, oh yeah, our hobby's dying, and I'm like, that kind of aligns to the whole. We have a habit of like not seeking out others like in person, and so for them they're perceiving it as like, oh, the idea of a plastic modeling hobby is dying. It's like it's not dying, it's just they're not here, they're doing it elsewhere. They're doing different stuff. It's just like, and like one of the guys I had met there, he was like, oh, I had no idea that there are other people doing gunpla. And I'm like, there's a lot of us in this area. Like
Mhm.
there's an entirely separate like gunpla club, or I say club, it's a Facebook group in my area, and like we used to have meetups, and then we stopped being able to rent a library space. But it was just like it like the way things are fragmented makes it harder to find things, and then like the lack of a natural like urge to like go find new social groups, and it just makes things like all the more like in depending on where you're at, like it may seem like there's no one else doing it, or you might just feel isolated in general. um yeah, and like to your point, like that, like it brings a lot of people together that otherwise would probably have never met. It's great.
Yeah, and I can
Wanna
see it on some of these people's like faces, and I can see it in like in their personalities as they become more happy and less fucking miserable. I have to share a story, an anonymous story from, and I quote, a cool and hot trans girl. She said that she discovered her actual name like I think maybe a week before she grew figured out the courage to come to a Gundam meetup, and she introduced herself as her real name, and that's when she like came out as a trans woman. And she says that because of that, and because of the genuine sincere friends she made through Gundam and like local meetups, it literally changed her life. And I like to think it saved it, because like she would have had no other like support group, and she wouldn't know how to like find new support groups had she not driven up the courage to like show up to a Gundam meetup and like talk to all these fucking weird nerds and talk about random shit, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's really important, and like you said, it's so like fragmented because we can go on Reddit, we can go on Twitter, we can go on Tumblr, we can go on Facebook. All four of these do not necessarily overlap at all, and that's kind of why Dan is considering making a post about our specific local meetup on the r/gunplus subreddit that is international, because that's how I found out about it. When I started going to the ones that Dan goes to, I saw it on Reddit. I remember sitting in my apartment and I saw the post. I'm like, I have to go. I can't just sit in my fucking apartment and not go now that I know about it. And I'm really glad I did.
Yeah.
So you said that you've got. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, yeah. Jag, isn't there like a large list of meetups, or is that maintained still on the Gunpla subreddit?
We do have a large list. It's not been fully maintained, mostly because not many people suggest new ones, and near as I can tell, we haven't got feedback on which ones are still there and which ones are dead. So,
I mean,
but we do keep a list.
yeah, that's like also like part of the problem, right? Is like due to like just needing a good way to like maintain like what's active, what's not. And like sometimes you're not like, you're like, oh, do I even go, or like do I show up and there's not like, oh, this has not been here for like 3 years.
That happened when I first came to Canada. I found a local Yu-Gi-Oh group and was just like, all right, I'll go to one of their meetings, and discovered that basically, despite them advertising, yeah, weekly meetups at this one place, they just stopped doing the meetings and never actually took down the Facebook post.
Hmm.
And that was kind of a shame.
So
And then
I want to. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, sorry for cutting you off, Tux. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So just rolling back a bit, like, Magic, you were saying that like you've got loads of local stores, so you're sort of very well catered for. So there's like a like Hobby Lobbies or something, and there's like another one who's like a big distributor for your state.
Mhm.
I was gonna say, like, most of my other experiences do involve like sort of big events, and like I was gonna say that like weirdly outside of that, what sort of one very small thing, I used to travel to Canada trying to make conventions to do like model contests, and that was how I met like new Gunpla people, right? And there were communities there was like a community centered around one of the stores in Toronto Chinatown for like years and years until basically rising rent like moved those guys out as far as I know. But the the I was gonna say like the very small independent retailer near where I work, like they're mostly a game store, right? But they also they also do Gunpla. Like one of the guys there is really into his Gunpla, and like because they've got Magic nights, they've got D&D nights, they've got like all sorts of things. They used to have like tabletop wargaming for a while as well because they had like the local club that was there. But they also do build nights. I think it's a fortnightly thing. And I was gonna say like I know that in the States, like a lot of like hobby communities, like for like game stuff, are very store centric because of course you need like opponents to like play against, etc., etc. So it tends like your local hobby store tends to be, or so your local game store tends to be like where people congregate for this stuff for like Warhammer or like TCGs or whatever. But is there any element of that for like modeling for like modeling groups out there or not? Like do you have like loads like do you have like store regulars who will like get together and hang out or do like an in-store build night or anything? Like did the stores themselves promote this at all
Oh
out
yeah.
that way?
Like the ones that I went to prior to 5 years ago were specifically run by one of the guys who worked at one of the hobby towns. The dump later got himself fired, so like that one kind of petered out. But we would meet up inside the hobby towns, and because of how successful those were, other hobby towns in the area started to do the same thing. The ones that I go to now are actually in, like you said, a game store that, like every night that we go there, it's also a big D&D and like a Warhammer night because it's a huge area. Like we only take up 2 tables at most, and there's a bunch of people who come to Gundam build nights, but we don't even take up half of the building area. Like we have full 2 or 3 full like Warhammer like tables that have like the whatever they're called, the material, the terrain like built into the table itself. Like it can
Oh yeah,
only
yeah.
be used for Warhammer, and they're always playing behind us. We always see like a few groups playing D&D like across from us. There's just a bunch of comic books and a bunch of board games just there, and that's why the comics and game store. It's called Madness. If you're ever in Plano, Texas, come check it out because it's a really good like area. I'm not sponsored by them, but maybe I should be. And they sell Gunpla, and it's a little overpriced, but you get the brick and mortar tax, and that's fine. And we always like try. I always try and buy at least something when I'm at Madness because they have a really good manga selection, and me and my boyfriend are collecting different mangas. And like that's sort of again feeding into the local community of that kind of thing. And like what you were saying about like contests, I also wanted to touch on that because it's not annually, but about maybe 3 or 4 times in like the 5 years that I've been going to build nights, we've had a sort of Grand Prix or like a big contest where we want to like get people excited and like build something, into this contest that we're having, and then we'll have judges and have prizes and stuff. And I think the Grand Prix was the last time we did, and it was basically like an anti GBWC because GBWC is so limiting and so like constrictive to exclusively Gunpla and Gunpla plastic. They're for the Grand Prix where we're like build literally whatever. Like if it's Gundam, that's cool, but if it's like Kodo, if it's like whatever the shit, build it anyways, and it goes in this other contest prize. And I thought that was really neat. And then we're also trying to get people together for our local IPMS meeting, like Springer mentioned, and like Springer's like IPMS folk, the guys in our local IPMS chapter also don't know anything about Gun Club. So now the guys who are left are like thinking, oh, this is how we revitalize IPMS. This is our avenue. It needs to be approachable to the people who are building stuff now. So they're very interested in Gunpla. They already have like a contest like for IPMS, they have the local show in May, and they already have a category. That's the word I was looking for. A category for Gundam specifically. They're like, please come and like enter your Gundams. We want to see what's up. We want to see what the community is like. We want to introduce like more activity to the IPMS chapter. So I just think that's also interesting to note.
So the right off the back of that, like the other thing I wanted to mention while it's timely and topical is the whole reason that I kind of wanted to push for this topic the other week was because I went to the UK premiere of the Sea Freedom movie, right? And I know that it's not out in Canada yet, as far as I'm aware, but of course it's like
May 7th.
Sorry.
It'll be out May 7th for US and Canada for general release.
Okay, but yeah, because like loads of people going to screenings in the US like last week or last weekend, I think. And it opened
This
for general.
weekend.
Is it this weekend? Is it this weekend coming? Because I thought people were talking about it. Like I thought it was last weekend, and people were talking about it on.
They were talking about the fact that it's coming up. It is, I believe, it is tomorrow and Monday.
Okay, well, I mean the specifics. Okay, in that case, I thought it had hit general release, or like there were sort of screenings happening at the moment, so that slightly dampens what I was going to say. But I'm guessing no one else here has gone to see it yet. In that case,
No, not yet.
No.
okay. Because the reason I ask is because I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if we end up with a whole load of people like interacting with other Gundam fans like in person for what might be the first time outside of like a convention type setting when they go to one of these film screenings. Because I don't know if Hathaway got screened. Hathaway came out during COVID, didn't it? So
Yeah.
Darwin's Island and Narrative were the ones that got screenings.
okay, yeah, they didn't. I don't think they got screened here, so like it all kind of it sort of all kind of went over my head. But I think this is probably the biggest Western Gundam film release, regardless. Like even if it feels a bit on the weak side.
But Sunrise is pushing to get it in as many markets as possible. Like there's all over Southeast Asia, Europe. There's screenings all over the place.
Yeah. So yeah, because obviously I went to a special event where everyone who was a pretty diehard Gundam fan, or alternatively someone who was being there were a bunch of people going for the first seeing a Gundam thing for the first time, but might have been interested in Gunpla, or like were coming along with friends, or significant others, etc., etc. But they had like there was a pop-up store from one of the UK retailers who's involved in setting the event up, and they had like a build table and things like that. People who bought bought VIP tickets were able to they had like a Gunpla build session basically, which is pretty cool. I didn't get to take part, but I sort of saw what the area was like and saw people sort of playing with their kits they'd built and chatting with people after the fact, and they seemed really into it. But it was also an opportunity for me to meet like a guy I know online. He's so he lives really close to me, but just on the other side of the river. And his girlfriend lives about the same distance the other direction, I think. But like they're both in my city, right? And like we've been talking, like he and I have been talking for years, but like we just never like thought about meeting up or anything. Despite us being like literally like half an hour away from each other, I think, on a good day. And yeah, so we were both going we're both going to this screening. We're just like, well, we'll meet up. Like all four of us make a double date of it. And it was just really nice to meet like a new in air quotes like person in real life who's into all this stuff. And I just wonder how many similar experiences we're gonna get from people who have seen the Sea Freedom movie, like either at the preview screenings in the States, because I think there'll be sort of more of an event like the one that I went to here, or like even just like meeting other people physically in person at the at the theater when they go and see a regular screening, whenever that happens. I'm cautiously optimistic. I don't think it's going to be like a huge thing, and of course people aren't necessarily going to open up to total strangers straight away. But one of the things I did notice at the thing I went to is that loads of people were like, because because like there was a place that was selling gunpowder. Like any two people who sort of were within a couple of feet of each other who had, when one of them had like any kits, the conversation just turned into like, oh hey, so what did you buy? What kind of gunpowder are you into? What do you build? What's your stuff like? And there were just rows and rows of people like while we're waiting for the film to start, where people were like handing phones around, showing off their photos of their own builds and things like that, because they hadn't had the chance to show them off to people in person, probably, possibly ever before. A lot of them.
So cool. I love that.
I would say I kind of had one of my experiences sort of like that was I was at Anime Expo 2019 during. I was waiting. I wanted to go to the GBWC, like they were doing the local the local judging like announcement like of like who won from the entrants that were there, and the convention you got to get in line early. So I'm sitting there, and then there are other people there. We're all just like, are you also here for GBWC judging announcements? What do you build? And like, so that exact thing happened where people were like passing phones around, trading some information. So like, it just like, you might not interact with these people ever again, but like you get some, just some FaceTime with, other people in your community that you know, just there's potential to, build some sort of relationship, or, just get introduced to, more than your little bubble, you know.
Yeah, like spread out your tendrils a little bit more so than you would like when you graduate from high school or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the kind of the good vibe I thought would be fun to talk about with this kind of thing. I really hope we see a lot more of that kind of experience. As a result of these things being pushed in. I nearly said meat space, but you know what I mean.
Yes. Meat space is a valid term here.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I mean, to the point, Magic. I don't have as far as I'm aware. This is once again, I probably have to go start hunting now. Local like build nights or anything. I'd have to either like make one, or it might exist and it's just not very well advertised.
Yeah.
I know that like one of the local game shops advertised that they started selling Gunpla, but like I don't know if like they're going to be one of those places where I can be like, hey, also hold a build night so I can invite all my nerd friends over.
It's
Um,
good like practice. It
yeah,
it brings a lot of foot traffic and that means more like business.
absolutely. I mean, I used to do the in person. Well, obviously, any like the point earlier, any sort of tabletop games are in person.
Hmm.
Used to do like the regular like Magic and D&D sessions and stuff in person, which that the stores just are packed. And if it's like you're in a strip mall, like most game stores are, you walk by and you're like, wow, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. What's this? I should check this
Hmm.
out. It's good. It's good for the business, and it's good to build community.
Specifically a local community you couldn't get anywhere else.
Absolutely.
So the other thing that I was thinking about, that again made this one kind of relevant. I know I've talked about this before previously, and I don't know if that made it into the final cuts or not, because I think it came up both times. But there is another UK gunpla retailer that is looking to host an event. They want to have like a gunpla like event day of some kind, and they're currently putting it. I think Jack, we talked about this. Like it's Gundam Mad. So Grenda's been like involved in the hobby community for like years and years and years. And
Top
basically,
notch
so like everyone I know is sort of basically cautiously optimistic, because the last time a UK retailer tried to do something like this, it went pretty badly. But it's very different people doing it this time around. I really hope it turns out a lot better. I replied to the survey that went out, and they were asking like things like You know, what kind of things would you like to see? Would you like quizzes with prizes, like screenings of things, you know, contests, etc., cosplay stuff. So, you know, it's interesting. They're kind of that they're putting out the feelers to the community. They want to know what what people might actually want from the show and like what they might be willing to pay for it. So they're properly doing their research. And I'm really curious to see how big it ends up being, especially kind of depending on where they do it. Because like that's the other thing, like with you know, in-person meets, like we're all, well, at least like several of us are in like quite big metropolitan areas. Like I live in, you know, the capital city of my country. But that doesn't necessarily mean the events are going to be here, but it's a good start, you know. But you know, for people who live further afield, Jag, I'm looking at you. You know, like any thoughts about, you know, what you can do, what you have done, if you want to try and meet people locally who are into, you know, who are into the hobby.
Well, first of all, it helps if there's a store that sells the kits. That tends to be the big issue. Because if there's no store selling kits, then you can't put up a poster advertising any sort of build nights, which is a problem right now. Right now, I'm living in yet another, for lack of a better word, bump nowhere town, where the nearest Gunpla meetup would be, I believe, 6-hour drive to get to. And as far as I'm aware from speaking with the local toy store who has been getting in kits and asks me for feedback on which kits to buy, which to avoid, there is basically me and one other person in town who do routinely build kits. Well, I routinely buy them. Building is a different story. And we don't have a space to do any sort of meetups. Doesn't help that I am the only one of the two who is above the age of 18, which makes doing any sort of meetup a lot more difficult and makes me hesitant to do such a thing. Short of, hey, we'll do a meetup with the Warhammer folks because they have a dedicated tabletop space that's available Saturday for anyone who does Star Wars Legion, Warhammer, BattleTech, D&D, other tabletop games. But my issue with going down there is that I've been there once before, and some of the folks look like smell like they've only ever seen a shower in a Sears catalogue. Hygiene is apparently optional, which is not so great because I don't like being packed in a basement where all I can smell is like unwashed bodies for 3 hours straight.
Yeah, I guess that's the dark side of this stuff, isn't it? I mean, that's the old wargamer, role player, magic card player, stereotype. There's that one tweet that did numbers a couple of weeks ago. That's like, you know, there are two types of Yu-Gi-Oh players. There's guys who don't shower and trans girls who don't know it yet, or whatever it was. And yeah, right. Which is, I think, has proved hilariously more true the more and more I've thought about people I've known who've been into TCGs. So yeah, like you know, it is an unfortunate stereotype, and you know, sometimes there's a basis for some of these things, and that's unfortunate. Like the store, you know, like I talked about the store that is localish to me that hosts all of these meetup nights and stuff. You know, they've got I think they have got a policy on like hygiene. I know not all stores do. But
I mean,
that has become more of the norm in like the last decade or so. Is there are stores that are like, we will refuse service if you do not, you know, take the basic, you know, steps to be in public around other human beings. You know?
I mean, was it the Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments, the official ones that had to like make a rule about hygiene, which is pretty telling.
Yeah, and like sorry.
But yeah, if the one making the tournament has to invoke a rule nationwide, like you're done fucked up.
Yeah, so I was gonna say that like the like Warhammer stores in the UK, Games Workshop stores, are like the kind of the standard for all this stuff here, because they are, you know, a hobby focused, like a local nerdy hobby focused community tends to form around them. And even those have had, like the one that used to be nearest to me before it closed, like had a sign, a sort of, it was very tongue in cheek and written in universe. You know, I've got a photo of it somewhere, but it's like, you know, don't don't bring the the pestilence of the foul god Nurgle to the store. You know, be sure to be sure to shower before
Alright, that's
coming
fun. I
out in
like that.
public. You know, and stuff like that. And like they had a can of deodorant just on the till as well, which again was really telling.
Jesus.
But you know, that's not really a
Was
substitute.
was it Links Africa?
It was at one point, yeah. Like the AKA Axe in the rest of the world, you know, it's that distinctive smell. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I guess that's that is the flip side of in-person meetups with new people. They
That
might
is
not
a
be,
con. Yes.
yeah, they might not be people who take great care of their personal hygiene. And that's unfortunate, but I guess the real answer to that is be the change you want to see in the world. You know,
Yeah.
be a
I
well put
think
together person who is polite and kind, and goes out to these things and nicely evangelizes your hobby. Like be a good role model for this stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that's actually like a really good like just base statement. It's like, oh, there's no hobby meetups in my area. Figure out how to start one.
Yeah. Like
That
it's
actually is kind of how mine started.
oh, hell yeah.
So, for context, I started Gunpla when I was like 19, and where I lived, there was jack and crap to do in terms of like nerd stuff. Like there was the GameStop, and that was kind of it. Um, so it wasn't until like really my last year after COVID at university where things like the Hobby Town started having their stock back up, and eventually I was just like, well, yeah, I only have like 2 quarters or 1 semester for y'all in the inferior system, um, to really have my university experience that I never really got. So why don't I just make a club? So I made the hobby club, which was essentially just, hey, do you like Gundam, Warhammer, Lego, crafts? Come down to this classroom and listen to musical roulette with me. Um, it was fairly successful, but thankfully now I haven't been back in a while because work and stuff. But they seem to really have built a community around it with tons of people posting Gunpla specifically, but also other hobbies. Um, so that was very much a, well, guess I'll just make my own with Gundam and blackjack.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you build it, they will come, right? That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
The plus note to doing it through the college is that you don't have to worry about um, things like, well, we don't have a store for it. It's like, well, you don't have to really worry about a store because you can just reserve a classroom. You also, not that I say this would happen, but like back to the hygiene thing, if you have like a problem person, you could always just call security and get them off. Like, you have the right to kick them out in most cases.
Yeah, the institutionalization of that kind of stuff is very helpful and very conducive towards like building a community. That's kind of why they have it, because they want you to have a good time at college. Sort of.
Yeah.
Depending on the college.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Asterisk.
yeah, like that's great. That's actually like I mean like a good example is like when I was in college, I was looking for people to, meet, and I found a gaming group that someone started in the exact same way where they're like, I wanted to hang out with people and I wanted to find people who also played the same games. So they got it made as an official club by the university, and it had been around well well after they had like graduated and returned for their masters and stuff, and they're just like, oh hey, it's still here and we have the same advisor. That's awesome. um It was just like, by having it like institutionalized, you're able to like, get a little bit more, legs under you, so to speak, especially in like those sort of settings.
I would argue that those types of clubs are much easier to get approved if there is some sort of board you have to go through, because typically it is a bring your own tools, bring your own games, or bring your own hobby stuff. You don't have
Yeah.
to ask money or ask for an account for money.
Yeah.
Um, and I mentioned earlier I did something called musical roulette. Um, I recommend doing something like that, like something for the background, just to have like as a joke. It was essentially like 100 playlist Spotify playlist where the bullet was a bunch of Italians poorly singing on the road again, but all the instruments were replaced with kazoos.
This sounds like an adventure.
Yeah, it, it was always like because it would be like for 2 hours, so we'd always almost hit it, but it was always funny trying to
The threatening of
you try to predict where it was, or you just might it's just dead silent, and then it comes on, and everyone's half the club is either cheering and the other half is groaning, that kind of thing. And it's also again, like I mentioned before, if you don't have like access to a game store or a game store that has Gundam. Like we have a couple where I live, but they just started doing Gundam before it was only like Warhammer. So if you don't have like that space, a university or community college or maybe even a high school would be a good opportunity. In the latter two, you can also have them open to the public. In most cases, if it's not a private campus.
Yeah, that's something I've been investigating, like just locally, is like, hobby shops here. Like, we don't have a hobby town, but we do have some small hobby shops. They don't have build spaces, so it's like, how do you like coax someone, be like, hi, yeah, open your store up, and like, also, can I bring some card tables or something? I don't know. It's like, I don't know, I feel like it's a bit of a hurdle to try sorting out, and like that kind of ends up leading you towards the like, oh well, we'll just go rent an area separately, but then like now you lose that whole organic growth of people who just happen to be at the store going, oh, you do the same thing I do, let's hang out. Which I guess may lend more towards the game store approach, given a lot of them already have like people who show up to do like Warhammer build nights, or and I think the this kind of touches on something. Your club started as like, it's not just Gunpla, it's like, do you make stuff, and
Yep.
I think a lot of people like try to pigeonhole like these little meetups when they start them out, and then like, when, because they're like, oh, it's just Gunpla. I was like, well, why not just make it like model making, which could be miniature painting, or Lego, if need be, or any Gunpla, or armor, just like anything to like, you have enough of an overlap in the Venn diagram of your interests, like you shouldn't try to exclude anyone, you know
Yeah. Yeah. When we first started, like I think I was pretty much the only person doing Gundam outside of my fiance who would occasionally show up. Now there's more Gundam people, but to start with, there was also the Lego guy and the guy who did like little figures, and occasionally someone would come and just do mini painting. Like you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're making it only Gunpla, because if especially if no one, I I feel like I'm one of the few in my state who actually knows what Gunpla is.
Mm.
So you're not going to get people to enjoy the hobby if you're only restricting to the hobby.
Right. And I think that also kind of lends back into the whole, like, just due to the natural fragmentation, like you might not be aware of other people who might not be aware of like your group. Like there might be another group somewhere that's just like not advertised, or in like, 6 hours away, because like that's just how things are going.
Yeah. For me, it's either I go down to Seattle, which is 2 hours, or I go across the border, which is 2 hours. It's like, well, I think I'll just do it at my college.
Yeah, and like for the RE like meetups, I found that it's mostly more successful specifically with Hobbytown in my very limited experience. If the suggestion comes from within Hobbytown itself, usually the employees that work for Hobbytown are interested in hobby material, weirdly enough. So when one of the guys who was an employee was like, "Hey, I am willing to stay after hours, open up the store, and like sort of maintain stock while these guys just hang out and maybe keep the register open in case anyone needs to buy anything," that goes over a little bit better than like some random customer saying like, "Hey, keep your store open for an extra 2 hours just because you might have the promise of maybe making a sale." Like,
Yeah, that's actually, yeah, that's a really like good point. A lot of, no, not a lot of, any of these stores are going to be more inclined to do so if it's not, one, just some random nerd going, "Hey, keep your store open because my friends and I want to hang out here." It's like, it's money that they're either spending or losing, or they're losing money by keeping the store open longer. And like, if there's already not something going on, then they have to staff someone extra hours, and that's a whole thing. And yeah.
yeah, and like on the flip side, I've seen people who are like, "Oh, I'm gonna have a build night at my house." No, keep it in a public place so things don't get weird. Gonna have to pass on that one. I'm willing to hang out with my friends in person, and I do build nights with my friends, but I don't like open it up to the general public.
Especially if you want like younger people.
Mm.
Like I'm pretty like I'm fairly sure I'm like one of the youngest in our group, but even then I would like to have younger people and trying to convince people to be like, "Hey, come to the stranger's house to build robots."
Yeah. Eh,
I doubt I would
We're
want
not
my
the new
15-year-old
girls.
to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
being
feel like
yeah.
it's got a lot of. Sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, it's got a lot of similarities to like how stuff with like tabletop role playing game groups go. I think because we like that's what we ended up doing at the store I worked at years and years ago now. And weirdly, that's how I met one of the guys who wants to be like become one of my best friends. I'm going to be best man at his wedding later this year, you know. But like the because we're a local store that had a gaming night. You know, people would come to the store on the gaming night and play games and stuff. And we had one guy was like a uh, he dropped off his son. Like his son was like 10, I think, 10 years old. And you
Yeah.
know, like he was happy with him going to like, you know, an event in a sort of in a public place to like do a thing with do a hobby thing with strangers, right? And like because the dad was into D&D but like didn't really have time for it anymore. But like his son had expressed interest. He's like, "Oh yeah, no, that's great. We'll find like a local hobby group for you." But then I left that store and then it closed. Like there was a change of management and stuff, so they stopped doing the hobby nights a while later. And I found out that most of the people in the group had gone on to play at one person's house because like his and this was a like a guy in his teens and like his parents just had a really big house and they were quite nearby. Um, so of course like most people were happy to do that and like his parents were nerds and they were happy to have people around for gaming. But obviously, you know, that younger guy didn't like move venue with the rest of the group because it was a completely different dynamic. You know, do the hobby thing at someone's house is just it's just so different to this is like a local hub, like a public hub type thing. The vibe is completely different there,
Yeah.
and like and you know
And then that's how you get
it's so
like
exclusionary even without meaning to be, if you see what I mean as well.
Mm-hmm.
it's also how you get like 90% of the RPG horror stories you see on Reddit is I went to this guy's
Oh god,
house and he was creepy, or
Mm.
I went to
yeah.
this guy's house and this player was creepy. It's like having it in a store adds some sort of like acceptable moderation.
Going back to the hygiene thing, like, please, you have to be out in public. Please be presentable and acceptable for that specifically.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, no, this is like the idea of like doing it in a public space is like, if you're thinking about starting up your own meetup, like that's definitely like one of the best ways to organically grow it. And especially because like you just build that natural trust of like you're at a store. Granted, not always the easiest thing to do, but yeah, like just getting it out there so that way it's not like, oh, this random guy on meetup.com says, hey kids, you want to come build gunpla at my house? Like, no.
You want to do a
uh,
line of nubs with me?
I mean, I got invited to a meetup, and I was like, oh, cool, where is it? And they're like, it's this address. And I was like, that's downtown. Is this at like a venue? Like, oh no, this is my apartment. I'm like,
Mhm.
I am a mid 30 something year old man. I still am apprehensive about just showing up to some random person's apartment.
Yeah.
Check to see if the apartment has a bathtub and they've been buying ice for anything,
Yeah.
Yeah, the kidney special. Like I say, I feel like we've reached a bit of a natural stopping point on the topic, to be honest. Like, I think we've covered a lot of different kinds of meetups and like very different experiences and situations, which is pretty cool. And obviously, what we hope to do.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any like? Sorry,
Go ahead. Sorry. I apologize for cutting off. Go ahead. Just continue.
I was gonna say like, I mean, does anybody have any like sort of if not closing remarks, like things they wanted to say on the topic before we kind of start to wind things down?
Um, One thing I kind of wanted to touch on and see if maybe other people do. Uh, are there things like, for those of us who go to meetups or any sort of in-person events, is there something that you would like to see more of? Or like something like you've heard of like other groups doing? So like for example, I really like that I have a chance to get feedback because like online it always feels more of like an echo chamber, you spend, a week building something and you just get a thumbs up and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, like, I didn't explicitly ask for feedback. That's maybe that's on me, but then like it always feels like anytime you ask for feedback, you get like the harshest of like, well, let me point out all these issues. It's like, thank you. That's not what I was asking for. But, you know, um,
Here are things you could have done better or
yeah,
improved on.
right. I don't know. Like it's kind of like a mixed bag online, but I feel like in person, it almost feels like it comes across a lot better whenever someone gives you like feedback. I wasn't sure if people have like anything that they would like to see, like their own sort of meetups, whether they've heard it or just
Well,
wishful.
my meetup experience has been very limited due to just my living circumstances. Like for the most part, like prior to moving here, my nearest meetup was about a 2 hour drive away, which I couldn't make most of the time because gas is expensive. And typically they would always pick like the most oddest times to do the meetup. So unless you lived in that city, there was like no way to make it, which was a damn shame.
Conversely, my meetups are we're actually thinking about doing like, hey, we're gonna have a specific show and tell thing. Like, bring your kit that you're working on, or bring something that you finished. We're gonna like pick it apart and give you some like good feedback if you want it. It's like meetups are a good place to learn new skills, share stories, and share experiences. And we're looking to like specifically devote a bit of our time to that specifically. We're not gonna have like a sign up and like, oh, bring your kit, this Tuesday or whatever, but we are looking to increase that sort of constructive feedback
Yeah.
for those who are looking for it.
I think
Uh,
that something that's relevant to that. Like I've never been to a in-person competition mainly because I don't know when they're ever happening or if they ever happen near me. Um, and
So
I
for
understand, and I
sorry, just
understand that. Sorry.
so just real quick, for that you could check um like at least the IPMS the US website. They have a pretty accurate list of local shows and like shows in the areas just around you if you want to check that out.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause, yeah, for a while it's mostly just been me hoping that the hobby town, just any hobby town in my state, will post something about it. Because some are either really good about posting what they're doing, and others are very bad. Um, and that just goes into a different grievance of mine of please stop using Facebook, use something better. But
Please, God.
that's a different that's a more of a I hate this boomer social media. Please get rid of it
Mm,
mentality.
mhm.
But yeah, it's actually kind of like for me it almost feels like a bit of a slippery slope. Like I wanted to find something going on. I managed to find, the like, oh hey, there's this thing. Go to like I went to one event and like by proxy of being at one event, people were going, hey, are you going to this one? And I'm like, what is that one? And they're like, oh, it's just like 2 hours away in like a month, and I'm like, wait, I didn't know it, like didn't know about this. Now I do. Or like people are advertising for, just their own shows at everything because everyone wants to get people to show up. So like it's like by finding just one, you can probably find a lot more. And like I think it's just the first step is just like getting out there.
Oh yeah, like there's
Yeah.
actually a few that I don't even go to because I don't have the time to it. But everyone like says, "Oh, this is the we're doing another meetup at this point, and then at this point." I think that's neat.
Thank you guys for meeting up with me to talk about meeting up. Would heavily encourage you to find one in your local area, and if it doesn't exist, start it if you can. It'll definitely enrich your hobby experience. And thank you for listening to this episode of Hanger v Hobby Hangout. You can listen to this episode and more, uh, where all fine podcasts are found. Also, check out our merch store. We have stickers and dad hats because dad hats are cool. And we will see you in the next one.